It's really interesting when you're talking. It brought me to mind a little incident I had. It wasn't even an incident. I was working for Shell Albion Sands up north
Yes,
in Alberta, which you're very well aware of if you know
I am.
Alberta.
Yes, I actually spent some time on that property, not when it was a Shell property, but as a CNRL property during the pandemic.
Since then, yeah, they sold everything about. Well, we know when they sold it.
Yes,
Anyway, so we had a conversation because I was driving a truck, a work truck out from the airport,
yes.
and those big transports on the road, like a
Mhm.
softball size rock flies out from the transport, hits me in the windshield.
Yes,
And so the question is it an incident? And, after an hour's deliberation on it, you look at it and say, well, the windshield is a shield. It did exactly what it's supposed to do. There is no way really, aside from getting out and sweeping the highway all the way between Fort McMurray and Albion Sands, there's no way to really, stop this from happening. But the shield did was what it was supposed to do. And the
yes.
problem, I think, is somewhere in that gray area where, if I'm following you, we want to claim so much responsibility so that we can get to that zero number that we're taking away reason.
Yes, and I think a couple of authors in Australia, a fellow by the name of Rob Long, he's taken it one step further, where he talks about the Saviour complex. And he ties it back to the Age of Enlightenment and this whole idea during that era that we could create this perfect utopia if we could just protect people from themselves. And that he goes one step further and suggests that a lot of what we're doing has elements of, or looks like, the sort of thing that one would see in a cult. This binary opposites, this you're either with us or against us, you're either safe or unsafe. The way that opponents are disparaged as, well, you don't believe in safety. Now, hold on a minute, I just don't believe in your philosophy, or I don't believe in your approach. This adherence to dogma, the use of these oversimplistic phrases and so forth. And he makes the argument of this cult of zero, he calls it, and this cult of what he calls safetyism, where he talks about something becoming an ism when it becomes a thing unto itself rather than something that serves a greater purpose.
You bring me right to like Animal Farm doublethink. Can we reach
Right.
goal zero? And everybody chants, yes, we can reach goal zero. But everybody knows that the world is full of
Well, we can
risks that
do
we
it.
can't even, yeah,
I've
there's
told
no,
executives, I've told executives for years how to do it. Just don't report anything.
or don't do any work. That's the other way we can do it. Just wrap everybody in a bubble wrap and send them home.
But that's the problem. If you set an objective like that for people, they will find a way to solve the problem. And the way they solve the problem is they just don't report anything.
Yeah, absolutely. I also found that, in my time in the industry, part of the issue was, instead of looking for safe production, safe construction, safe work, safety roles were, for a while, and I think it's evolved since, like, quite a bit since, while I was still in the field, it was
Yes.
evolving as I was there. It wasn't so much, okay, I'm going to shut down work because I'm a safety officer. It's, I'm going to stop work and help them find a solution, or even better, that pragmatically and ahead of time, I'm going to find a solution for this upcoming problem so that I can keep the guys that are actually out there paying my salary working, so we can get this thing built.
You raise an interesting point there. I think there are two aspects to this that I think are important as we evolve. One is the term officer, which has connotations of law enforcement. Except in law enforcement are not judge and jury. Law enforcement are there to gather information and present a case, which the prosecutor then determines whether it reaches a threshold for a prosecution to proceed. Except what we do when we take on the role of officer is we also define ourselves as judge and jury. We say what you're doing is wrong. Oh no, hold on a minute. If that's a step too far in terms of law, then how is it not a step too far in terms of the way that we manage a construction site?
Well, and it affects every approach from every supervisor if you have that
Right.
mentality. All of a sudden, we're going to go out there and we're going to catch people, and we're going to get some interventions. We're going to catch
Oh,
people
right.
doing wrong.
Right. And so the second part of this is that a law enforcement investigation is intended to delve into the situation and establish whether there is grounds for a prosecution. That's the purpose of it. Is there sufficient evidence to proceed with a prosecution? That's the threshold. And if
Yeah.
there is not sufficient evidence to proceed with a prosecution, that's the end of it. we've adopted and learned from law enforcement, but we've used it in the wrong way. We're not investigating to determine if there are a threshold for prosecution. At least today we're not. We're still stigmatically tied to that. The same way as we're still stigmatically tied to what we've learned from insurance, where we see risk in terms of the old traditional risk management approach of loss or no loss. And so we don't think necessarily in that enterprise risk way of effective uncertainty on outcomes, and we don't think about upside of risk so much as we perhaps should. So again, we come back to this whole idea, are we using the tools properly?
Well, and it's interesting too, because what you just said, I now I'm going back to the field. And so now you're a tradesman working on a construction site or working in an operation site.
Yep.
And the safety guy or the lead, because a lot of times they're not even reporting in their own silo, right? A lot of times the safety people are actually reporting to production or operations.
Yep.
So now they view what are they going to be viewed like, and what is every boss, every manager, every foreman going to be viewed like, except somebody that I know I'm going to do something wrong because I'm out here and we always do things wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And so now I'm hiding it. So immediately you've blanketed over the actual near misses, and you've blanketed over the corrections and learnings that you can actually find.
Yeah. 12 years ago now. And I forget his name off the top of my head, but a gentleman who was a former Air Canada captain who had moved out of aviation into some safety consulting. And as we were working on this project we were going to work on about what the prompts are for people to drift, we had this wonderful conversation about aviation and how they have a culture of reporting and the purpose of that reporting. So let's imagine that you and I are pilots of a particular aircraft, and we're on other ends of the planet for different airlines and in different time zones and whatever. And you're sitting at the gate programming in your whatever we're doing, pre-flight checks or pre-flight calculations. And in some other time zone, in some other country, at some other airport, I'm sitting at the gate and I'm doing exactly the same thing that you are. And we both make the same mistake. We don't think that matters. It matters in terms of the human-machine interface to the aircraft manufacturers, because they now say, hold on a minute, here's two events where there was confusion or the ergonomics of entering whatever we are entering weren't ideal, or he bumped this button when he was turning this knob because of the proximity. Now as an industry, we recognize that our errors, let's use that word without getting too much into the semantics of it, mistakes, omissions, whichever of reasons words we want to use, since we should pay tribute to his work since he passed away this week. Whatever term we want to use, the joining of the dots is a big deal, even if the individual events aren't. And so tradesman A working at Albion, tradesman B working in another site down the road at Fort Hills, having the same problems. They don't think it matters, but it does matter in terms of there might be something that is consistent across those two.
And then how many in between them?
And how many in between?
Yeah. So there's engineering we can do, and there's process we can do, and we can actually. So how do you get them to actually, and I mean, we've spoken on it already, but how do you get them to actually come out and give you the information? This is the issue I'm having.
They have to feel that they're trusted. Yeah. And that there's a maturity with that. We had a conversation this morning about the way that folks who are working in construction, that work doesn't have the same prestige as it once had. I'm 50 years old. My father's generation, tradespeople would often wear a tie under their coveralls.
Yeah.
And a tradesman was a respected professional. Now, if we go back to that and we start saying, yeah, you guys, we're going to start treating you as respectable professionals, now your opinions matter. Now you start to get all these other cultural benefits and stuff that go on just from that simple shift in paradigm.
It's really interesting you say that. I was doing some editing this morning with a lady who was on a month or so ago, and the conversation that I just cut up was based on this.